Welcome to Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free. This is episode 104.
I am Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis, sitting in the captain's chair here again. People you should know, guys. We know this guy. I'm surprised it took us so long to get to doing a podcast about an author. You know, we talk about, Martin, you started off the whole darn series with a book. You know, and we talk about...
That's true.
The whole thing started with the idea, hey, I read this book, and let's go with that.
You know, really, you could say that the entire podcast is predicated on the fact that Martin reads.
That's right.
I'll take that. I'll take that. I'll put that on my tombstone.
Martin reads?
I read.
You read and you know things. That's
and the great...
that's Tyrion.
Yes.
That's right.
And the great thing about that is that since it's going on your tombstone, people can read it as, I read.
Yeah.
Beautiful. That's right. We love those paradoxes and double entendres.
You know, we have done authors. You know, we've done Orwell as a hero.
That's true.
We've done O'Rourke as a hero.
Yes. Well, even when we did Nietzsche as a person you should know, is on his writings.
On the
that's right. Yes, not quite fair.
We did.
That's a history episode. Was a writer.
I'm glad you mentioned von Clausewitz because he's coming back again in this episode.
Yes, he will.
So I can get us to where we're actually going.
Yes.
John Keegan is the man we're talking about. Sir John Desmond Patrick Keegan, the Order of the British Empire, passed away in 2012. He is someone that you should read, listeners. Otterites, as we say. That's right. He is the rather, I don't want to say undisputed, but certainly one of the great giants of popular military history.
Yes. Now, and there are quite a few popular historical authors. Mm-hmm. He sticks primarily to the military history.
Correct.
And you have guys like Joseph Ellis, who's very much a biographer of Revolutionary War figures.
Or David McCullough.
I was going to say McCullough
is that great storyteller, popular historian.
Right. You got guys that focus primarily on Lovett, on the Civil War, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
But he is a military historian.
Right, and he was one of the first. And in the early 70s is when he came about doing what he was doing as a popular author. And we'll talk a little bit of that here in a minute because we're going to go over many of his works because he made military history something more than just that dates, events, movements, something that was interested only to academics or students in the military colleges and things like that.
Yeah, and that's important because I think we've talked about this in the past. I know it's come up in conversation with you guys, so I don't know if it's been on an episode or not. But the history of warfare is a lot of what is studied anyways, but it's because that's where a lot of the most important things happen.
Right. Those are always change points.
Because they're always change points. They're always flash points of major upheavals and things like that. But they're also where a lot of technological innovation comes from.
Right.
Because of necessity.
Right. And it moves the world forward, for good or ill.
Well, it moves it in a direction. Whether or not we call that forward is another thing.
Well, yeah, that's right. Because at least in the short term, it's often backwards.
Yes, warfare often leads to backwards movement, but it can often clear the playing field for forward movement.
Sure. Yes, but
Martin, you were yes.
And one of the revolutionary part for Keegan, and I'm sure Francis is going to get to this and talk more, is he's more than just this general did this and this general did that.
Very much so.
He's one of the first to do, you win or lose, yes, by generals making decisions, but also on how the individual soldier reacts. And that's what he focused a great deal of his early works on, what's the effect of warfare on the individual.
Mm-hmm. I like where you're going with this because... for one thing, I see that point of view echoed in much of what you bring to Snakes and Otters. Mm-hmm. But also, I see that as an echo of some of the great historical fiction that we read. Because it sounds very much like Jeff Shar's approach.
Mm-hmm. Right. Very much so, yeah.
From a historical fiction, very much grounded in fact, but fictionalized.
Right.
So I can see where the appeal to both of them goes hand in hand for us.
Oh yeah, in many respects, Keegan is very much related to that type of thing, but his is not fictionalized.
Right, it's not a narrative.
It's not a narrative. That's correct. It's not like that or Shelby.
Although I do like a historical narrative. Eric Larson is another one we could look at. That's a great historian. That when you first start reading, it's like, am I reading a novel? Or am I reading history? And then you realize you're reading history, but it's like whenever he does quotes, they're actual quotes.
Right.
Where people speak, it's actual quotes of the people who are speaking, and that was appealing. So to me, that's a very appealing thing with this sort of approach to history. How it affects the individual is very important.
The individual who's facing battle.
Interesting. You phrase it that way, of course, because his first really major book, the one that changed everything.
Yeah, the landmark book.
The landmark book, and I'm sitting here with it on our desk right here. I brought many of my Keegan books with me, is The Face of Battle. That's the exact book.
Right, and that's the one we recommend people start with. Correct?
That's right. It is. It's not long. I mean, goodness gracious, it's fully annotated and full. It's 342 printed pages. I'm sitting here looking at it.
Well, how much before you get to the bibliography and the
that's correct. Okay. Yeah, that's actual printed. Of all that. And it puts the reader into the trench with the common soldier. That had not been done before. It just wasn't. And he talks. It's very analytical, but it's also, infantry versus infantry, cavalry versus infantry, the personal angle of vision. It's very much from a soldier's perspective.
And in that book, he covers multiple eras.
Yeah, he does. That's correct.
He covers Agincourt, and what are the others that he covers?
Waterloo.
That was the major one that I was thinking of.
Exactly. Those are the big dog daddies.
Right, but he covers 4. There are 2 others that he covers in that. I don't have my copy of it open, so I can't tell you.
Exactly. Give me a sec here on that one. But yes, that is correct.
The Somme.
Somme, exactly. Yes. I don't know why I had a brain fart on that one.
And that I think is the one that would speak to us a lot, because we spent. We haven't done it in a while. I even said, didn't I say the last time we got together, I would be open to revisiting World War I if we talked about it from a certain perspective.
That's
I don't
right.
know what that was now, but
well, I've got a book that's next on my shelf that I think will tie it in.
That's what it was.
Arthur Herman. Lennon and Wilson and the New World Disorder.
That's right, because any chance to hate on Wilson, I am up for.
That's right.
Up top.
Bring the toilet paper, gentlemen, because we've got some dumping to do.
Yes.
Yeah, but for another day, because we're talking about Sir John. I
really want you to draw this out of you, Francis, because I know you're the biggest fan, even though I've got, I think I counted up like 11 of his books at home on my shelf.
I know. And you've got more than I do.
I've only got a couple. I've got digital copies, but I've got a couple physical.
Face of Battle, Mask of Command, 6 Armies in Normandy, Price of Admiralty, both his World War I and his World War II book.
And those are the 2 I have.
Yeah, and the World War I book is really good.
Well, I brought my illustrated version of it with me, and it's
because that's the one you want to bring for the podcast.
Well, of course, because that's right. But you can hear me touching it right here. It's a big honking book.
Yeah, normally I don't want to hear you touching it.
No. What is it with this today? You just
walked into that.
Yeah, you walked into
stepped into it like a wet cow pie. I get it. Okay, that's fine. But yes, it's a great book. Keegan is so readable. He's so readable. It's not narrative.
See, and that's the thing.
That's the thing. Yeah.
Most academics have a hard time writing to be read.
Mm-hmm. And that's why, listeners, you should read them. You should read him. Face of Battle was his first. It's the one that changed everything, because it was 76. He'd already written 6 books before that. Those were a little bit more specific. Those were more. It wasn't just World War II, but most of them were. Some of it was World War I. Was World War I. Was with Dien Bien Phu with regards to Vietnam and all that sort of stuff like that. But the Face of Battle is the one where the world took notice, and they realized this guy has got something.
Again, because he's moving beyond just, this is what the general thought, this is what the general ordered, this is the movement of this army and the movement of this division. It was really, really focused on what's the experience of an average soldier in the trench at the Somme.
And it was,
what can he see? What can he really do?
Keegan understood that the old way of doing things that you mentioned like that, is inherently boring to read.
Yeah.
It's really not. And that's why he wanted to be a popular military historian, but he didn't want to be narrative. Other guys have done that. Shelby Foote did that. Many
Yes,
others.
he was excellent at that.
He's very good at that, and it has its place. It's a great way of reading stuff, but he wanted to kind of find a happy medium in there because his is fully annotated, fully indexed, and it's accurate. I mean, there's no projection of thought within somebody's mind, which is very important.
Yes.
But it goes back to that idea of show versus tell. A good author will show, not tell. Well, that's exactly what he does.
Yeah.
He puts the people that he explains. This is what they saw. This is what occurred. He doesn't extrapolate what they thought, which leads to a more historically grounded approach. But he's also analytical as he goes on to that. He's saying this means something. And some of his conclusions in the face of battle were such that nobody was talking about any of that anymore, or ever. And he took that, and it was he talked about strengths and weaknesses of the battle piece. He was able to put those three diverse battles, major battles, all three, from totally different areas, and bring up the idea that there was innovation in all of these that changed the world. There's a reason that those three battles he picked is because they were something there that something new happened, something different happened. And he also shows not only the innovation and the changes that happened, but also the fact that they're also the same. There's a dichotomy, that paradox that we love so much. It's the same dance, but the tune is different. But it's still very much the same genre, for lack of a better analysis on all that sort of stuff like that.
And I'll just also mention, again, we're talking about the World War I book. I always view that as part of a kind of a, what do you call it, tripartite reading experience on World War I. Mm-hmm. His book, the Hugh Strachan book.
Right.
And I still like S.L.A. Marshall, even though that one's much more of a the
traditional style that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And you forgot to mention G.H. Meyer, too.
And Meyer is
Meyer, to me, is the go-to guy on World War I. Because his is very readable. And I think he's I'm putting words in his mouth. He's not said this. To me, I see him as an extension of Keegan, making it very accessible, inheritor of that mantle. Yeah. But he focuses on the whole thing. Keegan is much more telescopic. He zooms in on certain aspects and goes deeper with those. Folks, this is a great read. And his is also very personal in many ways, because he does talk, he talks about the average soldier. The Face of Battle certainly does that, but he doesn't stick to that. I mean, one of my favorite books of his is the one, The Mask of Command, mm-hmm. which, and I know that you have got similar favorites, Martin, for sure, that you work with on that. But Mask of Command, and I brought all mine with me here.
And the World War I book gets broader as well, and it's
because
a little bit of a political and social history.
It's the whole conflict. It's intended to be, yes. But Mask of Command studies the leadership styles of 4 different leaders, generals. And he
which ones? Because
I'm getting there.
Okay.
It's in chronological order, and it's brilliant. It's so brilliant. My gosh, it's so brilliant. Alexander the Great, the Duke of Wellington, whom I'm a huge fan, Ulysses S. Grant, who we're all big fans of, and Adolf Hitler. And shows where there was genius, or in Hitler's case in particular, where there was not. And it was all based on that treatise on the essence of military leadership. That's what it was called. My gosh, folks, if you this one here, you can blow through that one so fast.
Man, that's a much thinner book, yeah.
It is, yeah. These are not, generally speaking, these are not huge tomes that he writes. These are books that you can read in a very short period of time. They're not teeny-weeny. There's about 300 pages.
Actually, I guess it's just thinner paper, maybe. This is actually about the same length as Face of Battle.
Yeah, about 300 pages.
340.
Yeah, exactly. So it's they're very easy to get a hold of. Amazon's got them all. Keegan is probably...
And you're likely to run into them in a used bookstore as well.
Sure, because
they're published for quite a while in many editions.
And that's right, they're constantly in print.
Yeah, and popular books, so they'll be out there.
Fantastic.
I think my copy of Mask of Command is a whole different edition. So
it's, like I say, it's done it many, many times. They often have, like so many historical books, they'll have photo sections with maps
Right.
and things like that. There's some of that, but it's not it's not overly done. He lays all that stuff. It depends. Like you don't get any photos of Alexander the Great, but you got plenty of Hitler, for example.
Well, you could have photos of busts of him,
And there's some of that. Yes, exactly. You do what you get what you can get, I suppose.
Right.
But this guy here, it's amazing just exactly how prolific he was. He was not without criticism, I'll tell you that, because he is considered to be an anti-Clausewitzian. In other words, he opposed. We did the Clausewitz episode last year. Keegan took some heat for being anti-Clausewitz. He said Clausewitz didn't get it right. He did not like on Krieg, on warfare and military strategy. He said, he took a lot of heat from that. Keegan did, because Clausewitz, even though we don't really follow his doctrines, was so revolutionary. There are people that still consider him sacrosanct. You don't mess with him. The war and political philosophy.
Yeah, to criticize Clausewitz is seen as being rather politically naive.
That's what he was called.
And he focused.
And naif is what he was called.
Yeah, he does
politics.
focus on the individual soldier can lead you to ignore the politics of a conflict.
Right.
Yeah.
He was very focused on the military side, of the conflict side, and the tactics. He's not ignoring strategy, because he recognizes that's kind of how you have to get where you're getting.
Strategy is for the generals.
That's right.
Tactics is for the privates.
That's right, and and that's one of the reasons he was so powerfully. The face of battle just changed the world in many ways, because nobody had ever done it that way before. But he's got a broadness. I mean, he taught at Sandhurst Military College for like 26 years, as well as was a very prolific writer. I mean, my lord, he's published. And
Sandhurst that's the big dog daddy
in England,
of British military education.
That's right. It's their West Point. Yeah, it's where you go to really get it right. And it was military history that he worked with, and he was widely recognized as one of the greats. I find if you're looking for if you're wanting to dip into the Keegan well, the ones we mentioned so far, Face of Battle is obviously a great place to start. Mask of Command is highly recommended, but I really like his History of Warfare, because it's kind of I mentioned earlier, he was telescopic. He zeroes in on certain things. This is where he becomes macroscopic, and he goes back to the whole enchilada and says, this is how it has always been done. And he shows those movements.
That's interesting, because I have not read that one, but I was just reading a little bit about that one.
Mm-hmm.
And you're right, he outlines the development of warfare. And one of the interesting things he says in that, apparently, is that war is inherently cultural. Mm-hmm. Meaning that it's either part of the culture, is what I'm presuming is what he means, or it's not.
Right.
Now, I guess if we're Nietzschean, I might say that you're saying that the culture is either inherently predator or inherently prey.
You could say that.
Because master or slave is the way Nietzsche would.
But I'm having a hard time thinking of a culture that doesn't engage in warfare.
Right, because conflict between humans is always going to happen.
And if there were such a thing, it would inherently be gone very quickly, because it would be subsumed.
Because it would be the
conquered.
epitome of the slave or prey.
That's correct. Ultimately, there's
so,
that.
Does he mean, though, your approach to warfare, is that cultural?
I don't know. Because, again, I only have the reference to it. But that's also where he got into trouble for criticizing Clausewitz.
Yeah.
That's where he vigorously denounced the war as a continuation of policy by other means, which, I don't see how he can object to that. I think that is so inherently obvious that I have a hard time understanding how he could reject that, because short of, even at a tribal level where you're talking about, whether it's one tribe of cavemen versus another tribe of cavemen, or tribes in Africa, or small city-states in Europe that are essentially just slightly larger tribes, to countries, they're all going to. They're not generally. You don't go to war for glory purely. you generally, especially the farther back you go in history, you want some glory out of it.
Yeah.
But you're going to get something.
Yeah, that's what you're wrapping it in.
Right. That's how you sell it to the masses, if you even have to. But you go to war because you want something out of it. And that's policy.
Yeah. Keegan's trying to say it's cart and horse. He's basically saying politics is subservient to military endeavors. And
I think he's got it backwards.
That's von Clausewitz. He says it's the other way around, and that's one of the reasons he got such flack for that. He sees warfare, Keegan that is, as it's either dominant or it's not in a culture. That's where he goes back to that cultural thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're either Sparta or you are something
not.
Yeah, you're building your culture around something other than warfare, or you can build your culture around warfare.
That's correct. And ultimately he's saying that when it comes to warfare, somebody is doing that. Somebody is building their... I think it falls apart in modern era, which I don't think you can describe Vietnam that way. That's a different thing.
But
World War I, I can see where if he's using that as his lens, that's not bad because of the German military culture. I think that's what he's trying to say, is that ultimately would not be satisfied unless there was war. He's looking at through a 19th century mindset where that could be considered to be true.
Yes, but I would say that where he still has that wrong is that German military culture is at the service of one thing: Lebensraum. That's the German. I mean, that's the German reason for going to war throughout the 18th or throughout the 19th and early 20th century, is they wanted more space.
Right.
Which you want more. I mean, essentially, that's one of the main reasons why a lot of war happens. Is you want something that somebody else has. Again, policy. And maybe because I haven't read more of what he's saying, maybe he's saying that because it sounds like he's saying war is the end, not the means. And I don't know that's...
Yeah, that's what Keegan is saying. Whether that's, that kind of falls apart, folks. That's one of the reasons.
Now, maybe in some individual outliers, maybe.
Oh, I'm sure there are exceptions that might disprove
and certainly
the rule.
At the individual level. Because there are some people that, physical conflict is all they live for.
Well, Napoleon's a good example of that. Hitler's a good example for that.
I don't think so. I don't know.
I
don't even know that I would go for Napoleon, because I think it's even for him, I think it's still at the service of something else. I don't know that he went to war just because, that's the only...
Well, for him, it was almost Darwinian. I am the strongest, and therefore it must be mine.
Well, I'm going to be mine.
That's right. I'm going to spread my genius to everyone. Well, we laugh, but that was definitely
even Attila the Hun, which I think you might make a good argument for. That's just warfare for the sake of warfare.
Yeah.
Or the Dothraki in Game of Thrones might be a good because they're very much Genghis Khan.
They're based on that. Yeah.
But even because that's part of the cultural. But even then. Or Klingons.
Okay.
I like that.
Yeah, I like that.
Go with the Star Trek reference.
Yeah.
I was wondering if we were going to get there.
But again, the war is at the service of glory and honor.
Uh-huh.
So again, I have a hard time. I understand very much the criticism that he takes for that.
Correct. That's what's so fascinating about it, because he tries real hard. And
maybe it's because he focuses so much on just the military aspect.
That's correct. I think that's exactly it. That's why he goes there.
He's focused on one part of the elephant and can't see the rest of it.
And he's trying to argue that there's multiple elephants.
Well, no, I think he's trying to argue that it's just the trunk. It's like three blind men. One at the front of the elephant, one at the back, and one in the middle. They're all describing three separate animals.
Right.
And he's just at one part, and he's just describing, or maybe he's at the back, because war is hell.
Yes,
and you get shit on by an elephant, that's going to be hell.
Oh yeah.
Maybe that because that's what he focuses on. Maybe that's all he can see is that it is war is the point.
War is the elephant's bottom.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to be clever.
Or maybe it's all bottom. I don't know.
That's right. It's all elephant crap.
But
anyway.
It's a good point to stop.
But exactly, because we need a bourbon break.
That's right.
Because we're drinking bourbon today, boys. And we're over here at Studio R.
Yes,
in
Studio R.
On the atrium. It's an overcast day, but it's not bad.
That's right. But still, we have a wonderful view. We can see the sky. We can see the trees.
Yeah, it's
great.
It's an excellent day.
Oh yeah, it's
Yes.
cool, but by no means. It's sweatshirt weather, boys. Of course, we all wore our swag today, our little
Yes.
hoodies, so it's really kind of nice.
Since nobody's talked about it yet, I will go first. I'm drinking some Maker's 46. Hadn't had this in a while. The bottle's been sitting up there for probably a while. As you know, I'm not a huge fan of regular Makers.
Mm-hmm.
I think they are more marketing than substance in that sense.
Too
It's
sweet.
not a bad bourbon.
Too sweet for you, if I remember right.
No. As a matter of fact, because I think I kind of like that hint of sweetness in this, but
Yeah.
this is a more full-flavored bourbon, maybe.
Okay.
A little less harsh in the sense it's smoother. If I'm going to go Makers, 46 is what I would have to go with.
Right.
And you and I, Francis, have poured a glass of 6-year-old bottled in bond Heaven Hill,
Yes, that
old style
that
bourbon.
Robert has furnished us here yet again.
So
It was actually in the back of his bourbon stash, and you pulled it out, saying, "Oh, it's been a while since we did this."
Yes, it has been a while since we've had that. We got that because we learned about what it meant to be bottled and bonded.
Yeah, that's right. We talked about that.
And so I found a bottle and we tried it. It's not expensive,
No,
bourbon,
charcoal
but it's
filtered.
pretty
It
good.
says, it's got that beautiful dark amber color to it. A little darker than some, I would submit, but I suppose
I think it's a little lighter than
See,
than
isn't
some too.
that amazing? Just looking at it, we get two different looks at it.
But I had a little ice in mine, and that's melted, so mine's a little mellowed out with a little bit of water.
Well, yeah. See, mine is just neat.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the full Monty, as it were. It's a little harsher than some,
Yes.
and that's okay. It's just it's called old style bourbon. I'm not sure if that contributes to the punch that it has. That's a
I think
possibility.
a couple of ice cubes would take care of that for you.
Well, I don't have a problem with it. I'm just noting it.
Yeah.
That's what
Well,
I like it this way.
Because it's old style, I think what that refers to is that it's not the basic formula has not been monkeyed with like so many other bourbons to get the different flavors.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
It takes your basic mash, puts it in the charred barrel, and lets it age. There's no additional stuff. Because remember, bottled and bond means that it is done to very strict standards. Because the whole point of that was to stop screwing up bourbon,
right.
because that was a real problem.
There's no tobacco spit in it.
Exactly. Nobody wants tobacco spit in their bourbon.
I can assure you of
So
that.
yeah, so I'm finding that it fairly mellow. With the little ice, the chew thins out just a bit.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have quite that kind of chew to it. It's a little thinner. But pretty mellow and pretty darn good.
Oh, I'm liking it. I'm liking it a lot.
Yeah. And I think that was $12, $13
$12
bottle, something like
It's
that.
a $12 bottle.
Yeah. Certainly better than an equivalent early times. I mean, again, not that early times is bad, but I'm just that's you think of your low end bourbon. That's the one most people think of, at least around here.
Sure.
Yeah. But I would recommend mellowing this out with a couple of ice cubes.
Yeah.
It's a possibility. I don't know. Well,
It's an interesting thing about bourbon. The ice does two things. The chill definitely changes how you experience the bourbon.
that's true.
Yes.
But as it melts, it also dilutes it a little bit. I like it the ice for chilling more so than the diluting, unless you have a really high alcohol content one that the ice is not as absolutely necessary. That's why I like the stones or the metal cubes or balls to chill it, because those especially last longer. But yeah, so the ice will either dilute it a little bit or affect how the chill will affect it. I find that very amazing.
Yeah,
Very
it
interesting.
affects flavor. It affects the chew. It affects the where you're getting that
Olfactory experience.
right. Whether that burn is up or down. Pretty interesting. I was in some Teams meetings this week, as everyone has been, I'm sure.
Yes.
Teams and Zoom. I think in 2019 those were terms nobody understood. Now we know them all too well.
Yes.
But one fellow is in New Jersey and another in Texas. And the fellow in New Jersey was asking about, the difference between whiskey with an E and whiskey without an E. Well, of course, I was able to tell him with an E means it's from Canada or Tennessee and generally should be avoided. But without an E means it's from Scotland or Ireland and it's okay. And I was able to then also say, well, officially bourbon doesn't have to be made in Kentucky, but unofficially it's not really bourbon if it's not made in Kentucky.
Exactly.
So that was quite a bit of a discussion before we got started onto our training topic of virtual desktops.
Yes, and the great thing about bourbon, it is legally the native spirit of the United States.
Mm-hmm. Amen. Hear, hear.
51% corn mash, aged at least 2 years, and the Snakes and Otters rule is it's got to be made in Kentucky.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's just whiskey.
Yeah. Right. And no, it's not just a cultural pride thing, although there's a great deal of that. But Kentucky is uniquely situated atop a certain kind of water source, as well as the climate here can get extremely cold and extremely hot, which affects the aging of the bourbon. Mm-hmm. So it's the water as well as the climate that goes into it.
It changes how...
We're on limestone. That naturally... That's what creates the water that works so well.
That's a very good point too about the weather affecting how it's expanding and contracting in the barrels over the time you age it.
Right, because that expanding and contracting is going through that charcoal, that charred part of the barrel, and that's what gives it that extra kick.
You're bringing
what
in
makes
all
it something besides whiskey.
Yeah.
So I don't like to call bourbon whiskey, even though technically you can argue that it is.
Yeah, it's a type of whiskey, bourbon whiskey. But just call it bourbon.
That's right.
All right. Anyways. Well, that was great. That was a great bourbon break, fellas.
That's right. Well, it's going to be short because we've talked mostly about all that we need to with regards to
Keegan.
The
big time about Keegan and the reason to explore him. And again, Face of Battle, Massive Command. These are good entry points. The World War I book, the World War II book are good entry points. But the revolutionary thing is he put war into the perspective of that soldier, not just what his feelings were, but what his real experience was.
Correct.
What's really possible when you're a rifleman in a trench at the Somme.
Right, and that
is a revolutionary approach to military history.
That's what makes it personal.
That's right.
It makes it, I think, more relatable and understandable.
That's why it was so readable.
For the average person. Because, let's face it, most people sitting through history class were not like us. Weren't just soaking it up. They were bored.
Right.
And that's because most history classes are taught like most history books. And, these big sweeping things that, really don't relate to anybody.
That's right. And then this, and then this, and then this.
Meanwhile.
That's right. Thank you. That's exactly what I was trying to say.
But understanding context is the key to appreciating history.
Absolutely.
And understanding the threads all merging. Mm-hmm. And Keegan is one that I think is really good at that. And again, in his World War I book, it's a social history of the war in addition to being a military history.
It is, yes. And
it really helps with the understanding of what these men went through because you're really exploring their context, their experiences before the war that shaped them as soldiers.
Yeah, and we've said it before. Context is king.
Yeah, it is. And
it really
Keegan's
is
a master of that because he recognizes that you don't understand it if you don't have that in there.
Right, because that's what lets you understand history as a thread. That's Martin's favorite thing about history. Yeah. It is a thread. I like to think of things like that. It's tapestry, and as you said in one of the show prep sessions, you pull on the thread. And things change. It either unravels or it changes the nature of the tapestry.
It's not the same anymore.
But it's definitely not the same anymore. And context, that's all about the context. Yeah. It really is. Yeah. When you lose context, whether it's at the personal level, the micro level, or the macro level, I think you lose the majority of the meaning. Context is what lets us understand a particular historical situation in that particular time. Without losing our own perspective. And this is what I think is missing so much in today's look at how things were. Yes, we can look back at certain things in history and realize, oh my God, how are people that awful to do things that way? But then you realize, okay, this is what they've been taught, what they've believed all their lives, and yet somehow we still got out of that and we moved forward. And that's following that thread.
In fact, when it comes to military history, there was no way forward without something like that.
Yeah.
You know, the entire idea, World War One's a great example because before that idea, military was the path to glory. After that, everybody realized just what a hellish thing it was on a worldwide stage. And it's never been the same after that.
Right.
It's just approached very differently now. And we're the better for it because we realized this must be avoided. It's not something we run towards, we run away from. And it was in many things, it's the Psalm and all that went around that, as Keegan tried to indicate, that brought that to bear. It's been a great episode, guys.
Excellent. I think that was really good. I mean, it's short. What's our time on this?
We're at 35.
This is one of the shortest episodes we have done in a long time.
Well, it's...
but that's okay. Without going deep into his books, which, again, we try never to do because I think that could get...
we recommend.
Yeah, we recommend.
Yeah. And give you a brief
from your own
reason
opinions,
why.
I think that's important too.
Yeah.
We'd like to tell you why it's interesting to us.
Mm-hmm. And we believe that since we are Renaissance men that we are, that because they're interesting to us, they'll be interesting to our listeners as well.
To the Otterites.
To the Otterites.
That's right.
Oh, what a toast. To the faithful Otterites.
That's right.
All right.
So, Francis, what is up next, buddy?
I haven't got a bloody clue. No, I'm kidding. One of these, I had to say that at some point,
A little too much bourbon there for Francis.
You guys keep asking me that every time. Of course,
that's your job.
That's our job. That's a
Yes.
script. We kind of know that. That's kind of our little cue. It's up to Martin after this one because the next one is a Martin episode that he put forth.
Oh, yes. Eastbound and Bound.
That's right. Car chase. Well, talk about
Eastbound and Down.
Loaded up and trucking. We're going to do what they say can't be done. I mean, we can sing the song. Come on. He's Jerry Reed. But anyway, Martin had this great idea, as he always does. Let's talk car chase movies. They were huge when we were kids. That's kind of where we walk into the concept. But in Smokey and the Bandit's kind of like the big dog.
That's the epitome.
That's the epitome. But there was a whole movement of stuff around in the 70s in particular, and 80s, where this was a thing. If you lived through it, you get it. If you didn't live through it, we're going to tell you about it. It's going to be fun.
Hope you enjoyed another pointless discussion of eternal questions. Remember, new episodes published every Friday at noon Eastern.
Spread the word. We're on all the major podcast platforms. And leave us a comment or review because that helps others find us.
We're on Instagram, Twitter, as well as our website, snakesandotters.com.
I'm Martin.
And I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Join us next week. Same snake time, same otter channel.